It's in the 1990s. And for many years, I was a business trainer and a consultant, and, kind of slowly but steadily making my way in the world. So imagine my surprise and delight when 3 guys who I had worked with on and off over the years called me up. And they said, "Karen, we are starting a new consulting company, and we want you to join us as a partner, equal partner." I go, wow, I was so excited. It's like, God, I've finally arrived. So I said yes. And at one of our early meetings, we're sitting together and we're putting together the board and going through the articles of incorporation. So one guy took the chairman role for the board, another person took the vice president role, and then they turned to me and said, "Karen, why don't you be the secretary?" All right, so see me do this inner eye roll. And what just flashed in my mind, flashed before me, were all of those times I had been asked over the years to take meeting notes, to handle the meeting logistics, which is like a modern euphemism for coffee and food. And I said, oh, this is just another example of business housekeeping that we're all asked or expected to do as women. So I declined. Now, I could have asked for a VP position, but what was going through my mind at the same time was all of those boards who have many members who never have a title. So I figured, okay, I'm just going to be on the board and not have a title, and that was fine with me, and I didn't think another thing of it. So that's exactly what happened. Well, we go on, and for the next year and a half, we're really successful. But my line of business was struggling, and I knew we were needing to shut it down. And my partners knew that too. So imagine my surprise when on a Monday morning, my managing partner, also my fellow board member, calls me into his office and says, "Well, Karen, at the board meeting over the weekend, we decided to close your line of business." Okay, well, the decision is fine. But wait a minute. You had a board meeting without me, one that I didn't even know about. So what's up with that? He said, "Well, Karen, you actually had no business at that board meeting because you are not a board member and you never have been." I was dumbfounded. That just rocked my world. So I said, "What? You mean for a year and a half you have lied to me?" Oh, and here's the kicker. For a year and a half, all 3 of you knew this, and you perpetuated this charade. Well, I left feeling hurt, betrayed, and just, oh, so stupid, and pretty angry. Now, they say, when there's a mountain in front of you, there's always a path that leads you the way over. But I tell you, when you're in that deep, dark valley like I was, it's sure hard to find even where to start. But I did have a burning question that I wanted the answer to. And this question was, who exactly did own all those 21 pieces of intellectual property that I created in that year and a half that the company sold and resold? So I found me a really good intellectual property, IP lawyer. He sat down with me, listened to my story, asked a few questions, and said, okay, he's going to have to go do some research for a few weeks. And so that was it. Okay, I left, went back to work, silent, but seething. A few weeks later, it came time to meet with my lawyer again. And he sat me down and he said, Karen, well, all that intellectual property that you created, it's yours. And I just went, phew. Because for the first time in this experience, I felt like, oh, maybe I'd found the path forward up over that mountain. And we spent the rest of the meeting planning how to go forward. Now, I knew, there's one thing he did, though, before I left, is that he handed me a business card of a colleague of his, someone who specialized in gender discrimination lawsuits. He said I had a classic case. Well, that made me pause. I really had to ask myself, well, how much harm did I really want to do the company? And how much time and emotional energy did I want to stay stuck in things like revenge? And what I saw was just a picture of me getting down into that mud pit where these guys already were and slinging dirt, and I tell you, that did not appeal. So I put the card aside. But I knew I needed to send a message. I knew it needed to be concrete, it needed to be specific. And these folks, they valued their wallets above all else. So on a Friday afternoon, I went into my managing partner's office, and I gave him one last opportunity to bring me onto the board. And he was having none of it. So I handed him my resignation, and then I handed him the business card of my lawyer. And I said, by the way, all of that intellectual property that I created that you sell and resell, it's mine, and I'm walking with it. And yes, that created some shock and awe. For the next several weeks, we negotiated, and I licensed my IP back to the company. And then I also kept all of my stock to make sure I always knew what these folks were doing. And you know what? I grew up. I also learned that the board secretary position is not housekeeping. What was I thinking? I went on to take that intellectual property, develop my own software product, sold that all across the country, parts of Europe, South America, and Asia. I'll tell you, when you're in the middle of an experience like that, you feel like a failure. And what I learned from that, and the little while that it took afterwards, while I was developing that software and, as we were selling it successfully, that really it wasn't failure, and it wasn't even defeat, because that's the other side of failure. All it was really was a major disappointment. And in truth, this story isn't really even about gender, because I've also learned over the years that this group could have been a bigger mix of men and women, and the same thing could have happened, and it could have just been a group of all women, and the same thing could have happened. So when I think back on that time, there is another image that comes to my mind. I think back on all the mistakes I made and the challenges I face. When I think back on the mistakes I'm making today and the challenges I face, when I think about all the mistakes I'm going to make in the future and all the challenges I'm going to face, I realize several things. First of all, I have gone on to create some of the most wonderful partnerships with both men and women over the years, because I learned what not to do, and that has really brought joy and richness to my life. And as I think about the mistakes and the challenges, there is this image that comes to mind, which is the image of a pearl. And I say to myself, Karen, when an oyster gets irritated, and Lord knows I was irritated, when an oyster gets irritated, she mends her wounds by making a pearl. And in fact, all of my work is in business storytelling. There's even a narrative structure where we take a story of a life experience and we bring that forward, take another one, bring that, and another one. And these are all little pearls. And we take all of these pearls and string them on a string, like a string of pearls. And that's what it's called, a string of pearls. I think I have a bunch. And the string of pearls represents the wisdom that we've gained and represents our life journey and our life story. So my hope and my wish is for you, as you handle those mistakes and meet those challenges that you're faced with, that you too, like me, I've had to dig deep to find the pearls in these situations, but that you too look at those experiences and find those pearls and build your own string of pearls that represents your wisdom and your journey.